All right, so a career in conservation science, huh? That's awesome. Talk about making a real difference. We're diving deep into this one, checking out some resources from RoleCatcher to give you that inside scoop, what it really takes to make it in this field.
Yeah, it's funny when you say conservation scientist, most people they immediately picture like someone in a rainforest,
Yeah.
right? Tracking gorillas or something.
Yeah, definitely. The whole Indiana Jones vibe.
Right. But honestly, it's so much more than that. I mean, field work is a part of it, but there's a whole other side that most people don't even realize is there.
Okay, so let's break that down. For someone who's totally new to this, what does a conservation scientist actually do beyond like the image of being out in the field?
So, at its core, it's about protecting our natural world, right?
Mm.
But that takes so many forms. It's about understanding how ecosystems work, how different species interact, and then using that knowledge to develop strategies for conservation.
So it's not just about loving nature, it's about the science behind it.
Exactly. You've got to be able to collect and analyze data, use things like GIS mapping, understand population dynamics. It's a lot of hard science.
Wow, that's super interesting. So you're not just a scientist, you're also like a detective trying to piece together all these different factors. What's something that surprised you when you first started out in this field? What was that aha moment where you realized, wow, there's more to this than I thought?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think for me, it was realizing how much of this job is about people. You're not just working in a lab or out in the field by yourself. You're constantly collaborating with others, whether it's other scientists, policymakers, local community.
Really? I never would have thought about that. It seems like a very solo kind of job, just you and nature.
You'd be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
For example, early in my career, I worked on a project that involved relocating a herd of elk. Seemed pretty straightforward, right? But we had to work closely with local ranchers who were worried about the impact on their land, government agencies to get the necessary permits, and even conservation groups to secure funding.
That's amazing. So you're not just a scientist, you're a diplomat, a negotiator, a project manager.
Exactly. And that's what makes this career so dynamic and challenging in a good way. You're constantly learning and adapting, using your skills in
Mm.
different ways depending on the situation.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's break down that career trajectory a bit more. I know a lot of our listeners are really interested in that clear path, like what are the steps I need to take to get there? So, what are the typical stages in a conservation scientist's career from like entry level to more senior roles?
Yeah, RoleCatcher actually lays this out really well. At the entry level, you're really building that foundation. Think assisting with field research, maybe using some population modeling software to track species, really getting your hands dirty with data collection and analysis.
So, fresh out of college, you might be out there in the field working alongside more experienced scientists, getting that hands on experience. That's awesome. And then as you move up, you start taking on more responsibility, right? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. So at the junior level, you might be leading some of those field surveys, you
Mm.
know,
Yep.
actually getting to design them and make decisions about how to collect the data. And then you're doing more in-depth analysis, looking for trends, maybe even presenting your findings at conferences or in reports.
Oh, wow. So you get to be more independent.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that RoleCatcher highlights, which I think is super important, is that even at that junior level, you're already starting to collaborate with stakeholders.
Stakeholder collaboration.
Yeah.
So, like, what does that actually mean in the context of conservation science? Who are these stakeholders?
It could be anyone who has a vested interest in the work you're doing. So local communities, government agencies, even private landowners, you have to be able to communicate your research effectively to all of them. And that's another skill that becomes increasingly important as you move up.
Makes sense. So it's not just about being a good scientist, but also a good communicator, being able to get your point across in a way that everyone understands.
Exactly. And then as you transition into those mid-level roles, you're really starting to develop and implement full-on conservation plans.
Wow. So that's a whole other level of responsibility. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it could involve things like securing funding for projects, navigating all those complex regulations and policies, managing teams of researchers, and constantly adapting your strategies based on new data or, unexpected challenges that pop up.
That sounds like it takes some serious problem-solving skills.
Oh, absolutely. And that's actually something that RoleCatcher does a really good job of highlighting. They've got this huge database of interview questions, right? And a lot of them focus on those critical thinking and problem-solving abilities. Like you might get asked about a time you faced a complex challenge and how you approached it. Being able to articulate your process and, show that you can come up with creative solutions, that's really key.
So it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think, how you apply that knowledge in real-world situations.
Exactly. And then, of course, as you progress to those senior level positions, those skills become even more crucial. You're leading large-scale initiatives, shaping long-term strategies for conservation. You might be publishing your research, presenting at international conferences, really becoming a thought leader in the field.
That's amazing. So you really do start with that strong foundation in the sciences, but then it branches out into all these other areas, communication, problem solving, leadership. It's really a multidisciplinary field.
It really is. And what's interesting is that RoleCatcher also emphasizes some of those less obvious skills. Like they actually list customer and personal service as being important for conservation scientists.
Wait, really? That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that at all. How do those kinds of skills play into a career in conservation science?
Well, when you think about it, you're always interacting with people, right?
Mm.
Whether it's stakeholders, policymakers, the general public. Being able to understand their perspective, their concerns, and build relationships with them, that's crucial if you want to get people on board with your conservation efforts and ultimately make a real impact.
It's like you were saying earlier, you're kind of like a diplomat in the world of science. And having a tool like RoleCatcher to help you navigate all of that, on top of all the scientific knowledge, that's going to be so valuable.
It really is. And what's great about RoleCatcher is that it's not just about getting that first job, right?
Hmm.
It's about your whole career, staying up to date, learning new skills, figuring out those next steps.
Hmm.
It's really helpful for all of that.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We talked about like what the work actually involves, how the career progresses, those essential skills, and of course, how something like RoleCatcher can give you that extra edge. But for someone who's just starting out, maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this, what would you say to them?
I'd say, first of all, that's totally normal. It's a big field. There's a lot to learn, but that's part of what makes it so exciting, right?
For sure.
So don't be afraid to jump in, get some experience, make some mistakes along the way. That's how you
You
learn.
don't have to have it all figured out on day one.
Exactly. Just be open to learning, find some mentors who can guide you, and most importantly, hold on to that passion for the planet.
That's such a good point. Because at the end of the day, that's what drives all of this, right? That
Mm.
desire to protect our planet, to make a real difference.
Absolutely. And if you can combine that passion with a smart approach, really using the resources out there like RoleCatcher to develop your skills and build your career, you can achieve some amazing things.
Well said. So, to everyone listening out there who feels that call to protect our planet, who is passionate about making a difference, you're not alone. There's a whole community of conservation scientists out there. And with hard work, dedication, and a little strategic planning, you can be one of them. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of conservation science.